When burnout and frustration become part of daily life, whether it's from a long job search, multiple layoffs, or toxic work environments, burning it all down might feel like the only option. But what if reinvention did have to be so chaotic?
Reinvention does not have to look like that. And in fact, the way I teach it with my community, with the Courage Crew, is it's really about identifying an anchor point in your life, a point or a thing in your life that if you transformed that area, it would essentially have a ripple effect and it would create change throughout your entire life.
That's Dr. Jasmine Escalera, the queen of reinvention herself. She helps women break out of toxic work cycles and realign their careers with what truly matters. In today's episode, she's sharing her exact process for how you can create lasting, meaningful change without the chaos. We spoke about how to break out of toxic patterns, mindset shifts to unlock reinvention, regaining control to avoid burnout, and how to redefine success on your own terms. Whether you're navigating a long job search, recovering from multiple layoffs, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders as an HR team of one, or wanting to learn how to set better boundaries at work, grab a notebook, because this episode is filled with actionable advice you can start implementing today. Let's dive into my conversation with Jasmine. So I am so happy to be joined by the queen of reinvention herself, Jasmine. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. We have been in each other's sphere on LinkedIn for so many years. I mean, I think since I first started coaching, I've been following you and respectively, you've been following me. So it's always great to just see you and to be here with you. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's always amazing. And I love all of my guests, but I always love when I get to have friends or people I've known for years on the podcast.
I know, that's always so fun.
So I know your story, and I know that, like me, you've had lots of pivots throughout your life.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide to focus on reinvention?
Yeah, it's kind of a whirlwind of a story because I was career coaching, specifically career coaching, job search coaching for quite a few years. And I felt as though I had lost the love for it in a way. And I was still doing it. I was still having immense impact with so many women, helping them to find positions, helping them to find their passion and purpose within their career. But I felt like I needed to listen more to myself and create something that I think was a little bit more heart aligned. I feel like in business, one of the things that sometimes can trick us a little bit is, you follow these business leaders on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and they talk about these major milestones, not just the 10K month, but now we're talking about the 100K month. And I think we can get lost in that shuffle a lot and forget that the reason why we created a business was to give us freedom and flexibility and to honor that internal voice and passion that we have and bring it to the world. And so I was very passionate about career coaching, but I felt like I was so now far removed from the corporate world. And I had changed, like so much of myself had changed. So I wanted to focus on reinvention because when I asked myself, what am I really passionate about? What I was passionate about was helping women to honor their internal voice, listen to their internal voice, and start to make decisions that more closely aligned with not just the woman they wanted to become, but the life that they wanted to create. And I wanted to help women start to prioritize themselves and their goals and to see that reinvention, although a very roller coaster ride of a journey, because you are breaking down limiting beliefs, you are tapping into old belief systems, you are healing, you don't have to go through that alone, and it doesn't have to be a struggle. So reinvention coaching for me was to pivot into something that was more heart aligned, but also to go back to the root of why I started this business, which was to create a service that connected to my heart.
I love that. And I know also as a business owner that once you get to that point where you're not feeling it, where your heart isn't in it, like
Hmm.
that comes through, especially us who we create content as part of our business strategy, business development strategy. Like you can just start feeling it. And as soon as
Yeah.
I start feeling it, it's like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. The energy bleeds into the content, it bleeds into the marketing, and you show up for your clients because obviously you care so much about them and their transformation. But it ends up showing up in other places. Like I just didn't feel as though I was as happy in my life as when I had first started my business. And I was really questioning if I'm working this hard and doing something that I'm not enjoying as much, did I essentially just recreate my career, where I was working, I was the workhorse and I was putting in the hours, but I wasn't happy doing the thing that I was doing.
Yeah. So when people hear the word reinvention, at least I know me at first, I think, okay, burn it all down. Let's start over of something drastic and start
Yeah.
from scratch. Is that really what reinvention means?
It's so interesting. I love that you're asking this question because at first, reinvention was that for me. And what I recognized and noticed going through many healing journeys was that I was actually very addicted to chaos and scarcity. And I was incredibly addicted to fixing things. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn. We were fairly poor. We didn't have much. And so I was really used to living in chaotic family systems and chaotic structures and chaotic communities. And with barely, anything to get by. So when I first started really transforming myself, the way that I did it was I would throw freaking bombs in my life, and I would wait to fall to a rock bottom before I finally said to myself, like, I have to change. But reinvention does not have to look like that. And in fact, the way I teach it with my community, with the Courage Crew, is it's really about identifying an anchor point in your life, a point or a thing in your life that if you transformed that area, it would essentially have a ripple effect and it would create change throughout your entire life. So, for example, if you really want to be able to create this thing called generational wealth, you want to get out of debt, you want to start to really create investments for yourself, you may step back and ask yourself, well, where am I going to generate this money from? And traditionally, it's through your 9 to 5. So the focal point for that individual would be to really build the courage, the confidence, the strategy to reinvent within their career to create or generate additional income so that they have the disposable income to then create that generational wealth. So I like to really work with my clients to understand, like, if we changed one area of your life, how could that essentially then just have a ripple effect for other areas that naturally you start to feel transformation, so that it doesn't have to be like what I used to do, which is like boom, 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 blow it all up. It can be something that really you are thoughtful around, you're strategic around, and you love yourself through the process. You don't have to hurt yourself through the process.
I like that you mentioned the whole addiction to chaos and scarcity.
Hmm.
I identify with that. A lot of the pivots that I've done have been like burn it all down,
Yeah.
start over type thing. How does that manifest for people who are working a traditional 9 to 5, not necessarily business owners like you and I?
You mean how does it manifest in terms of the transformation?
Or in terms of like, okay, yeah, like how do you see your people, like clients that you've worked with who work a traditional 9 to 5, who are
Mm-hmm.
burning it all down, even though it doesn't look like, okay, I'm starting a new business. How does it look for a 9 to 5 person?
Yeah, so reinvention in a 9 to 5, a lot of times for the women that I work with. Traditionally, I've worked with women of color, I've worked with women who have, you know, come up in the career world and has had a lot of barriers towards growing and growth and getting to the place that they wanted to be. So for a lot of my clients, reinvention actually is starting with the rebuilding of their mindset. and the rebuilding of their confidence after toxic workplaces, after feeling like you haven't been listened to, after feeling like you couldn't speak up or be your authentic self in the workplace. And I tend to believe that mindset truly is the foundation to anything, including reinvention. So, what I like to do with my clients is we want to take bold, courageous action towards having the life that you deserve. But bold, courageous action means that you really have to take action. You have to be bold and you have to be courageous. And that starts with you believing that you have the capacity to create the life you want, believing that you deserve that life, and then really believing that you can do it. And so, a lot of times, the foundation, whether it's a 9 to 5, whether it's starting a business, is always the mindset. So, with the women that I work with in their career, a lot of times it's about learning how to bring that confident version of themselves into the workplace so that it can have that trickle effect into I'm now increasing my visibility in this space. I'm now bragging about myself. I'm now promoting myself. I'm now asking for promotions. I'm now really getting that pay raise. Or I'm not going to tolerate this BS anymore. I'm going to find a work environment and just an environment and culture in general that's going to accept who I am. So I think for a 9 to 5er and for anyone who's undergoing reinvention, the number one thing is really to ask yourself, what am I trying to create? And before I try to take any actions towards creating that, what are essentially the limiting beliefs or the negative thoughts that I have towards even the creation of that? Because you can implement a strategy, but you're not going to implement it effectively if you don't have 100% belief in it. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't take action while creating belief. And that's something that I had to learn as well, is that I can build a business while starting to continue to believe I can build a business. But you have to start the process of belief.
Yeah, it's really all about the mindset. And I know for my listeners and the audience that typically follows my content, we usually work in TA and HR, which
Mhm.
are roles where you're like taking care of the company. It's
Oh
about
gosh, yeah.
people. It's about taking care of everyone else. And I've seen, at least in my life, when I was working, when I was an employee, it manifests as like, I would go from company to company and I would like go to the companies with the biggest problems, like red flag alert in the interviews. I knew this was a hot mess. And I
Mhm.
was thinking, I can fix this. I can come
Yeah.
in here and fix this. And like after a while, you just like go chase and chase that. And it's like, yeah, you get more money, you get everything, but you yourself start feeling like the burnout and the
Oh
like
gosh,
the
yeah.
stress of everyone else's issues. Have you worked with many people who have manifested like the whole like burning it all down means going to something that looks shiny and new, but in the end it's exactly the same thing you were just running away from?
Yeah, so there's so much to say here. First off, within talent and HR, I don't think we really talk enough about burnout for HR leaders, executives, managers, people in that space. The burnout is real. The trauma is also real. I've worked with people in HR who are seriously have PTSD from some of the experiences that they've had to go through change management, laying people off. I mean, that's traumatic, to be the one in charge of something like that. So I don't think we talk enough about the burnout that HR executives and talent acquisition executives, all of the leaders, anyone in that space is really feeling on a day-to-day basis. So if you are in TA, if you are in HR, please know that I am sending you so many flowers right now because I mean, you're right. These are individuals who hold up organizations and typically don't get like recognized for what they do. I think that in that specific space too, you are kind of chasing the organizations that are a hot mess because that means that you can go in there and you can help, and essentially that's what you're there to do. Yes, so it's a challenge here. So one of the things that I recognized in my own journey, and then this became something that I very I was very hard at teaching. Like I wanted this to be a major point for everyone. I posted on this on LinkedIn. The hardest position to start after a traumatic position, after a toxic work environment, the hardest position to start is the new position, right? And the reason for that is because oftentimes we are running from one thing and we run right into the arms of the exact same thing. And so there's a lot of processing that has to happen between you leaving that position and you stepping into the next one. And a lot of it has to happen before you even accept that role. You have to really identify what is it that that company or organization did not provide to me? What is it that I truly need? Who do I want to be in this next organization? And then a tough one is like, what am I going to leave behind? And if you're doing that reflection in that middle ground, right, like as you're searching for the new position, it essentially helps you to identify the right organizations. What I love to do with my clients is I love for them to map out what do they want to see, not just in their next role and position, but within their next organization and within their next leader. And then to craft interview questions that are specifically based on those things. And so it almost kind of allows you to do this reflective exercise, but then map that out so that the questions that you're asking during interviews are really thoughtful around what you want and what you don't want to ever encounter again based off of your past experiences. Now, everyone always asks me, well, I could get in this job. Like, how do you really know, like 100% certainty? You don't, right? You don't know with 100% certainty. But I can tell you that with thoughtfulness, with reflection, and with the courage to ask the right questions, you are limiting statistically the possibility of you starting the cycle again. Because really, what I truly believe from a spiritual standpoint is that you will continue to be in the pattern, in the cycle, until you change it, right? And that often requires us taking a step back, recognizing the pattern, which very many of us do, but then actioning on changing the pattern. And that's where we sometimes fall short.
I love that. I love the whole, yeah, we know the pattern. We know it, but
Mm-hmm.
recognizing it and taking the action to be like, okay, I see this happening. This is what I'm going to do to get out of it. That all starts with you shifting your mindset.
Absolutely.
Um, Burnout can be so draining.
Yeah.
What's your go-to strategy for helping people like rediscover their spark and their purpose and their passion, especially after toxic workplaces or long job searches, layoffs, things like that?
Yeah, it's so interesting because burnout is a really interesting one because, I work, and I'm sure you do too, quite a lot on my business, right? I have never experienced burnout unless I was doing something that wasn't aligned with the purpose of why I started this thing. And so burnout can have a variety of different factors. I think there's an internal factor, meaning I am not aligned with the purpose of my life, my soul, my intention, my career, whatever that is. I'm just completely out of alignment. And so I'm working harder thinking that that's going to make it feel better when it actually has the counter effect. So there's that internal component where if you're experiencing burnout, it could quite possibly be that that's a signal that you're just out of alignment. And that requires you to do that internal work of like, am I in the right work environment? Am I in the right space? Am I in the right business? Which was something that I had to ask myself. Then there's the external component, right? The external component is you happen to be in an organization where burnout culture is that's just what it is. And that's the norm. But you also have control of that too, right? So I always want for people to understand that you have control over your circumstances. You have control over where you are. You may not be able to throw up the deuces and quit this job today because financially that's not within the cards for you, but you do have the capacity to do the things that I'm sure you and so many of your guests have talked about, the networking, the starting the resume, the getting things started. And I can tell you that when you take your power back and when you take your control back, and when you really stand in that, I'm not allowing this to happen to me anymore, the power that you take back helps you to start setting those boundaries, right? Because oftentimes people will have a hard time setting the boundaries and saying no. But it's because you haven't made the affirmation yet that this is no longer in service of you. Once you finally tell yourself, this is no longer in service of me and I am not going to let it happen, the boundaries just naturally start to unfold. So I think burnout really does, you have to look at it from those two kinds of lenses are of, are you doing what you are aligned or what you are supposed to do? And then externally, are you in the right spaces, or are these environments just essentially triggering you to start to work too much, to do too much, and that's causing you the burnout?
Yeah. I can see as you're talking, I can see so many examples and remember so many times because even when it's not a job search, even when it's not after a layoff, just regular day to day of being a
Mhm.
TA professional, you're working with different hiring managers, you're working with different candidates, all the pressure, all the expectations, usually budget. I always say budget is a trigger word for anyone in TA or HR because we usually have no budget, but we're expected to do so much. So burnout creeps in really quick if
Mhm.
you don't know how to set those boundaries of it's like, great, you want me to do all of these things. You're also not giving me the money to do all of these things.
Mhm.
And that's fine. We don't have the money. This is what you're going to get type of thing. Those
Yeah.
conversations are the ones that help you not get into that stress and that burnout and that like, let me go burn this all down and start over somewhere else and do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and the career space is a tricky one, I have to say, because when you think about the career environment, right? Like it would be awesome for us to all be able to say like, no, I mean, this is how much you pay me and this is how much you're going to get out of me. And I'm sorry, there's just no other thing that's going to happen. But the career space is challenging because the career space is actually tied to your livelihood. So you get paid to work, and when you get paid, you then pay your rent, you pay your food, you pay your taxes, you pay all the other things. So this is a tricky space to navigate because it can be really challenging for people to see themselves taking that stance when essentially their livelihood is actually connected to this position. And if you are someone who is triggered around money, so you grew up in scarcity or you didn't have financial safety or financial security or stability, now you're going into ingrained, very deep trauma around money. And so it is a very tricky one, the career space. And I think that's why we sometimes, have clients or friends or people or women or people we know who were like, come on, just stand up for yourself. But it's a really hard one to navigate.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest fears or obstacles that people face when they're considering reinvention?
I think the biggest one is when you decide to change and reinvent your life, when you decide to walk a different path, there's a lot of healing involved in that. Like a lot of healing. The reason why we are walking the path that we're on right now is because it's comfortable and it's safe. And if it's comfortable and it's safe, that means essentially your brain, your biological system, everything is like, why would we ever change? You're alive, you're eating, you're paying your bills, you're doing fine. There's no need for us to go through this thing called reinvention. Like, why would we ever do that? So you're fighting biological systems, but then you're also fighting your mind, right? So you're fighting your body, which is used to doing things in a certain way and having a certain chemical balance, and you're fighting your mind, which is used to thinking a certain way. So there's a lot of healing, there's a lot of breaking down old belief systems. Reinvention also, which is something that no one told me about, but I figured it out through the process, can sometimes be very lonely because when you start to shed all of those old belief systems and you start to say that life is no longer in service of me, I'm going to go out and seek the one that is. Well, there's a lot of people who are not going to go on that journey with you. And even people who you can't just release and let go of, like family members, that relationship is going to change and it's going to look different. And so a lot of like shifting that has to happen in reinvention. And it can sometimes feel a little lonely. It can definitely feel pretty uncomfortable. And so knowing that is, I think, really important. It doesn't mean not do it. Actually, I think the best thing that ever happened in my life was going through multiple reinventions, because the calmness, the peace, the freedom that I have in myself, I wouldn't trade this for the world. But it does require that level of work. And what I always tell individuals is, during every reinvention, there was always a point where I was just so sad. And it was because with growth comes grief. You have to grieve the version of you that you are changing. You have to grieve the people that you are releasing. You have to grieve so much. And it's almost kind of like your body is just going through a process. But growth is always on the other side. So when I find myself getting stuck in this place of grief, I always know I'm on my path to some really beautiful change.
Is there any specific like things that you do to overcome these fears? Because no one likes feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But we all know, like, if I do this, if I get out of my comfort zone, there's change, there's growth on the other side. But still, like you said, our body is comfortable. Our brain tells us, why are you
Mhm.
doing this? Why are you wanting to be uncomfortable? Is there anything that you do, any like tactical things or any specific things that you do to
Yeah.
like be able to overcome that?
I think there are two really great things to consider, and one is activators. So, we often scroll through Instagram and we look at what other people have, and we get this trigger envy or jealousy response, right? I always like to look at what other people have as a way to activate myself to possibility. And so when I see things, I always ask myself, do I want it? Do I want this? How do I get it? What can I achieve? How do they do it? How can I talk to them? How can I find someone who did it? So I think it's one part is finding activators, finding people who show you what's possible when you get to the other side, because it gives you something to anchor into. One thing that I realized is that because I was so used to living in scarcity, when you're in scarcity, the creative side of your brain just shuts off because there's no creativity in scarcity. And so if you're going through a reinvention, you're going through these feelings, you're changing your life, the creative part of your brain might actually start to shut down. And so what you want to do is you want to find creativity, you want to dream, you want to open up yourself to exploration, not shut yourself down to it. So finding individuals who have what you want to create, and they don't have to be people that are right in your vicinity. I didn't have any of those. I didn't have people who had what I wanted in my space. I found them through LinkedIn. I found them through Instagram. I found them through other means. So I think that's one thing, because that helps you activate that creative side, that innovative side, that visioning side, that dreamer side. And then I think the other part of it is, very often I would go through these things by myself because I didn't understand what I was going through. And so I was doing it alone a lot. And what I always tell people is that there are so many people out there creating the life that they want to create, and having that sense of community, those supporters, those cheerleaders who are going to help you in those moments where you're like, I'm really feeling it today. That's another really great thing to have. So I would say finding people who can activate that part of your brain that helps you see possibility, and then getting that support, right? That tangible, like, you're going to do this, you're going to make it through, is also incredibly, incredibly helpful.
That's why I love what you're doing with your community. And I love that it's free because you're surrounded by people who are wanting to go through this. They're actively going through this change, this reinvention period. So being surrounded by other people who are doing it can help you, because I know when I'm going through those periods, my brain tells me at times, it's like, you're delusional. You're never going to get that. It's like, oh, yes, I am delusional. And I will be
Yep,
delusional until I get exactly what I want, because this other person
absolutely.
has it too.
Yeah. No, I mean, I use that exact same word. I mean, I wake up every single day and I tell myself I'm a multimillionaire. My bank account does not agree. But there is that part where you have to anchor into the delusion, because on the other side is the reality, right? So it's current state delusional state, and then reality. You have to sit in that middle ground. And that middle ground is a very important moment, because if it's not happening, and in this day and age, we want everything to happen yesterday. We want it on Amazon Prime time. So it's not going to happen like that typically, but it's going to happen. But that delusional state is where you can falter back. And I think one thing for everyone to know is it's okay if you do, right? Like, I think that reinvention and transformation is a daily process. And there are going to be points during the day where you're going to have it, you're going to feel powerful, you're going to feel strong, you're going to feel like the delusion is your reality. And then there are going to be moments where you don't. There are going to be days where you falter, but always wake up the next day and just restart. It's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. So that middle delusional time is really the time where you have to anchor in, but also know that it's okay if you falter, because you know how to get back up, right? You always know how to get back up. You have the strategies, you have the tool set, you can do it.
Changing gears a bit, I know sometimes it's hard for TA professionals to like let go of traditional success metrics, right? We've all been told,
Mhm.
go in, get this job, do this, 401k, all of that, right? How can we redefine success on our own terms?
Oh Lord, oh my gosh, this is a big one, because I tell you, like, there was a moment in my life, and I can really remember it, and it's a tough one for me, because there was a moment in my life where I realized that everything I was told was a lie. Like, every single thing that I was taught was a freaking lie. And my parents told me, get the six-figure job, the 401k, you're going to be set for life. I was traumatized on a daily basis. I was so unhappy. I was just experiencing tremendous lows, to the point where I never checked myself in, but I'm pretty sure I was an alcoholic, because I there was no way, I couldn't handle it. Like, I just couldn't. They told me, get married, you have a husband, you'll be safe, you'll be secure. I was in a not good marriage, and I was miserable in that too. So there was just this point where every single thing that everyone told me to do to have this safe, secure, and stable life was just a facade, and it was just so fake. And that was one of the hardest moments in my life, because then it was, I wasn't a child. So it wasn't like someone could say to me, like, Jasmine, this is actually the path. Like, this is the way you walk. I was an adult. I had to figure it out myself. And that was a challenging place to be, because I was like, well, if it isn't this, then what in the hell could it possibly be? And what I had to really do was every single day just tell myself, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to wake up today, and I'm going to collect experiences. I'm going to try some things. I'm going to talk to some people. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to sit down and reassess. What did I hear that I like? What did I hear that I didn't like? How am I living that I'm enjoying? How am I living that I'm not enjoying? And just really come face to face with the lie. And I think that's the biggest thing, is creating what success means to you. You don't actually have to have the definition. Like, it doesn't have to be defined. In fact, all you have to do is just say, well, this isn't it. I know that. Like, for confirmation, this is not it. Then all you have to do is say, well, if this isn't it, then what can I do to just have experiences? People ask me a lot, like, how do I find my purpose? I think your purpose in life is just to give yourself a shot and have experiences. Like, just every single day to give yourself a shot and have experiences. And then through those experiences, assessing and asking yourself, what's the next thing I want to do or try? What's the next experience I would like to have? What's the next thing I would like to just kind of give myself a shot at? I think purpose is really about collecting experiences and knowledge of self to help you really figure out what the next step is. So it's the same with success, where it's like, you don't have to have it defined today. You just have to know that that's not it. You don't want that anymore. I'm committing to making change, and change just means opening myself up to experiences and possibility. All right, what does that look like? Maybe I can have a few combos with people. I always thought maybe I would try that. Let me see what that's about. So it's just this beautiful research phase. But people are really scared to be in that phase because as humans, we need to have anchors. We need to have control. We need to know what's next because uncertainty biologically triggers a lot of things within us that equal potential death. And we don't want that. So, if we can just realize that our body is just going through a biological mechanism and it's not real, we are safe, we are okay, and we can explore, we will allow ourselves to do that.
Like you said, I mean, maintaining stability and security and not activating that danger zone, you're about to end of the world type thing is important for us as humans. Can you share any practical tips or any practical steps that you can take? Like, yeah, you're wanting to do the change, you're going to redefine success, you're defining this for you, but on the way there, how can you like
Yeah.
balance and maintain that?
Yeah, so there's a few different things here. So, one thing is, I'm a firm believer in that internally, we traditionally know what we want to try. Like, because we usually have that internal voice that's telling us, like, or pointing you in a direction. It's that traditionally we're just not listening to it, or we listen to it for a second and then those fear mechanisms pop in of like, well, how do we make that happen? Da, 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 da. And then we just shut it off. So really what it's about is it's almost kind of like you're wearing like dirty goggles or dirty glasses. You just have to start like de-smudging your glasses so you can see a little bit more. And oftentimes the de-smudging process really is about listening to the internal component of yourself. It's also about digging into like my life thus far in this area of life, my career, for example. What have I enjoyed? What have I not enjoyed? What would I like to do or try next? What kinds of experiences would I like to have? What am I interested in learning more about? And going through that research and exploration phase. So many people are like, I don't have time for that, blah, blah, blah. Look, you can stay on the path that you're on for the next 30 years. How do you think that's going to feel? I don't think that's going to feel so good. So even spending a few minutes a day doing this kind of reflection will 100% get you to the space of where you need to go. So in the Courage Crew, we have a 30-day challenge where we do exactly this, where it's like set a goal. And for 30 days, you're going to spend a few minutes every single day working towards that because we deserve that. But then there's also like on the path, you were kind of mentioning the biological component, right? Like you're going to get triggered. You're going to experience discomfort. And that's really about leaning into mechanisms that help your mindset and your nervous system to relax. So, doing things like journaling, which is a baseline, wonderful practice for everyone to do, doing things like breath work, doing things like taking a walk in the middle of the day when you start to feel a little bit stressed and just letting your mind wander. Everybody kind of like laugh at these things, but it's like they really help. So I think you have to have the tactical processes to help you go through this moment, but you also have to have the grounding processes. And I won't call them mindful processes, just grounding processes to get you back to you. Because when you are triggered, you're just moving a little bit further away from your best self. So these processes just help you move closer to that representation of you.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the practical things like journaling and the breath work and walking. I mean, I rediscovered walking last year because just like me, you're a CrossFitter and I love CrossFit and I try to go every day and that's a great stress reliever. But walking,
Yeah.
really, I've just found it to be like so peaceful. And depending on how activated my stress is at the moment, sometimes I walk and listen to a podcast. Sometimes I walk and listen to, I like Brain FM. Anyone who's heard my podcast knows I've spoken about Brain FM, which is like music, scientific music to like help you
Yeah.
either focus or de-stress. But sometimes I just love walking and listening to what's happening around me.
I think that's the best. I really do. And sometimes I forget how powerful it is because I usually always put podcasts, like podcasts or music or a walking meditation. And in those moments when I put nothing in my ears and I'm just walking, I find that I get more calm and centered just doing that, because the natural sounds of nature, I mean, I live in a city, so it depends on what's around me at that time, but the natural sounds of nature, like when I walk on the beach, like that's a whole nother experience. But that can be really soothing. And there are great walking meditations that I've tapped into recently that are so incredibly helpful, in terms of just helping you to regulate your nervous system, but also connecting you to who is that highest version of you that you want to really connect to right now. So, yeah, I think those are great practices. And CrossFit also is definitely a stress relief for me.
Yeah, I think CrossFit is so challenging. Like every day it's something new. You don't have time to be comfortable while you're there. You just have time
Yeah,
to focus on like, how am I going to survive this workout and do
yeah.
this right now?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's really great because I do believe that the more you can make yourself uncomfortable, and it doesn't matter in what space. It kind of is very similar to like what I was talking about earlier in the episode about the ripple effect, right? If you work on your strength, if you work on getting out of your comfort zone, if you work on, stressing the body in a healthy way, right? A healthy way in one area, you naturally start to just move a little bit differently in another. And I think that's the power of exercise, no matter what it is that you really do start to like change your personality to be more confident doing it. So it's great.
Perfect. So this has been an awesome conversation. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, so I be on the LinkedIn streets all the time. That's where I feel like I mostly am. You can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I post about the Courage Crew pretty much daily, but if you want a link to join the Courage Crew or you have any questions for me about it, please definitely hit me up. The Courage Crew is the only free online community for women who are undergoing a reinvention. And the whole goal of that is to provide a community and a space for you to do this without feeling like you have to do it alone. And it's just a wonderful support system for anyone who's interested in doing this. So definitely hit me up there, and I would love to see you in the crew.
Cool. Any last things, anything that I didn't ask, but you think is important for someone considering or going through a reinvention to know?
Well, I have a question for you, actually, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I would love to know what is one of the most powerful lessons that you've learned in one of your biggest reinventions? Because I know, through our personal conversations, I've followed you in the last few years go through a lot of change and a lot of transformation. And so I'm curious to know through those moments, like what was the biggest lesson that reinvention taught you?
That is an amazing question. I think the biggest lesson really is knowing that I can do it, knowing that no
Mm,
matter what, I'm going to be okay. Because even when I felt, and I'm going through a reinvention right now, I just launched a new service. It's the
yeah.
scariest thing I've ever done. It's like, I know I have this amount of money in the bank account. And if I don't make it happen in this amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
something's going to happen. That something's most likely means I'll go get a job. I don't know, whatever. Like, but I know because of everything that no matter what,
Yeah.
I'm going to be okay.
Oh, how did you, I mean, now I'm turning the podcast episode on
That's
you,
fine.
but how do you think you developed that mindset? Because that's, I didn't have that in the earlier phase of my life, right? That came through tremendous trials and tribulation where I then was reflecting on like, damn, Jasmine, like you got you. No matter what, you got you. But where do you think that sort of resilience and mindset of like, I will always be okay? Like, how did that come about for you?
I think that comes from really reflecting and looking back.
Yeah.
I've gone in the past couple of years, since 2016, I've gone through 4 layoffs.
Mm,
None of them have been any performance related or anything. It's either the company shut down, ran out of money, things like that. So you put all into things like that. And then you go through these periods and you still think like, what could I have done better? Like, the company shut down. That has nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
but you still go through that. But then when you get out of that period and you look back, you're like, even though I was scared, even though I was trying to find my what I did or what I could have done better, you are so strong. And I like writing things down and
Hmm.
looking back to how I was feeling in that period. And when I'm on the other side, I look back and think, wow, you
Yeah.
did that.
Such a powerful exercise. It's one that I tell my clients to do all the time. Like, when did you feel the most confident? When did you feel like you overcame the biggest, trial or tribulation in your life? Because that's essentially what shows you who you truly are, right? The, there are, my clients sometimes tell me, like, I'm going through a really hard time. I wish I wasn't going through this. But the hard times are what shows you who you truly are. That's what builds your character. And it's not to say that we don't all want to be in those good, soft, wonderful moments, but you don't really appreciate the good unless you've gone through the fire, right? Like, you have to know what good really means. And good really means something special when you have a journey like yours. And it's not to say that we want to go through those journeys, but those are the journeys that truly make us who we are. So I know, I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much for entertaining my question.
Of course. No, I love this. I might make this part of the podcast. Like, do you have
You
any questions
should.
for me?
You should, because there's such a, I think you have such an amazing wealth of knowledge. I have seen you go through journeys. I know your story. I mean, when I first met you, you were helping people do video resumes, and video resumes were not even a freaking thing. And now we're talking about this all the time about how you have to do video and blah, blah, blah. You were a pioneer, so you should for sure have people ask you questions.
That's so interesting. I'm back to video now, not video resumes, but I'm helping my fellow TA people and HR people really
Mhm.
create video content. And I've
Yeah,
done it in a way that I think is, although I'm not a pioneer in it, I think it's a way that really helps people be themselves and be authentic, which has always
yeah,
been a thing. But it was so scary for me to go, like, because when I was doing video, and no one was doing it at that time, I got
no.
mad hate of
Oh,
like,
yeah,
oh, this isn't gonna work, blah blah. And I'm like, huh, look at you people now.
yeah.
All the people that were saying not to do it now offer the service. Imagine that.
Yeah, no, it's a
But
huge thing. I mean, with job seekers now, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I say to them is like, hey, look, everybody is doing what you're doing, dude. Like, everybody's doing what you're doing. The base, the minimum right now is not cutting it. You gotta get yourself a free Loom account. You gotta start doing some video thank you notes, all of that good stuff. So yeah, you started that way before anybody was talking about that.
so it's interesting now, all of that, and I went back to video, and I'm like, you know what? But this is what I love. I love video. So I was happy to find a way to merge helping the TA community, which is what I really wanted to do. I think the way you fix the broken hiring process is you empower the people that are in power in the hiring situation. You don't tell job seekers to adjust and adapt to the broken things that the industry is doing. You help
Yeah.
and empower the people. And I think it's just so interesting how all my husband told me all roads led back to video.
Well, I mean, it's the wave of the future for sure. And I mean, I tell people the same thing where it's like, look, corporate America is a poop show right now, but it always was. So, it's really more so about like, what is it that you want? What is it that you're looking for? Let's take our power and control back and reshape the narrative for ourselves. Or else we're just sitting around waiting for the system to change. And that has never worked. So I love what you're doing. It's fabulous. Video is the wave of the future.
Thanks to Jasmine for being on the show. Before we wrap up, I want to share something that's been a huge help in my own reinvention journey, especially when I need to de-stress and gain clarity. It's called Brain FM. They create science-backed functional music made specifically for your brain. Whether I'm taking a walk to clear my head or just trying to reset after a stressful day, Brain FM helps me refocus and find balance. Brain FM isn't sponsoring this show, but I love it so much that I became an affiliate so I could share it with you. You can get a 30-day free trial by visiting brain.fm/Rona Pierce. That's brain.fm/Rona Pierce. Now, as the TA job market starts to pick back up, we're all looking to get back in the game stronger than ever. Over the next few weeks, I'll be sharing episodes packed with strategies to help you reinvent your approach to talent acquisition. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Throw Out the Playbook wherever you get your podcasts. And if today's conversation with Jasmine inspired you, please leave a 5-star review. Reviews help other TA folks find us. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you next week.